ABC 7 News, the Chicago area's #1 news, with Alan Kraszewski, Diane Burns, Jerry Taft, and Mark Giangreco.
Alan, word tonight of a possible breakthrough in the fight against lupus. It's an immune system disease that attacks many parts of the body. So far, there's no cure, but a Chicago hospital has now performed a groundbreaking transplant that just might eliminate the disease. Here's ABC 7's Harry Porterfield.
This is 24-year-old Heather Markel, a lupus patient, and she is making medical history as the beneficiary of a stem cell transplant, a new procedure for treating the disease.
She is now 2 months out from the procedure and has no evidence of lupus at this time. For the first time in 10 years, her complements are normal.
The procedure involves the collecting of stem cells from the patient's bone marrow. After purification, they are reinserted like a blood transfusion. Chemotherapy is part of the process. Heather Markel is the world's first patient with an active disease to undergo the treatment.
I'm just very pleased that they've finally found something that they can actually do, because they have, over the years, we've tried many different things. We've tried chemotherapy, we've tried pulses, which is very large amounts of steroids at one time, which it works on some people, but none of them ever worked on me.
Dr. Robert KATZ of the Lupus Foundation has praise for the accomplishment.
I think the research being done at Northwestern is a very exciting research because they're actually trying to get rid of lupus in a patient. It's not applicable to most lupus patients who have mild or moderately involved disease, but those people who have severe lupus could benefit tremendously from this type of procedure.
We are early. We're 2 months out, and so we really don't know, what the future will bring. We'll just have to continue to follow her.
And as she watches the progress of the treatment, Heather will continue studying to be a doctor. Harry Porterfield, ABC 7 News.
Doctors are hoping the procedure can eventually be used to treat other diseases.
Researchers at Northwestern Memorial Hospital may have accomplished a world's first. They appear to have cured a woman of the disease lupus. It is a sometimes fatal disease that afflicts 3,000 people in the Chicago area alone. 90% of them are young women. News 2 Chicago's medical editor, Dr. Michael Breen, is on call with more. It sounds really exciting.
It is very exciting. We're about to meet a woman who's been on an incredible roller coaster. Just 3 months ago, she was near death with an agonizing illness. Heather Markel's bone marrow had gone haywire. Its cells were mistakenly attacking her kidneys, her joints, even her spinal cord. Now, the solution was to replace that marrow, and now Heather may be the first person in history cured of her illness. Heather Markel on the right has a lot to smile about. She may be a world's first. The first to be cured of what's been a horrible, and for her just 2 months ago, an almost fatal disease. Because of lupus, her bone marrow was destroying her kidneys and attacking her lungs and heart.
This just looked like something that might be promising, and I was willing to try.
What Heather was willing to try was a transplant. First in February, in a procedure like this, 1.5 quarts of blood was taken from her body. That 1.5 quarts was then processed, and the result was this: just a single teaspoon of very early blood cells. Those cells were frozen. Next, researchers used high-dose chemotherapy to destroy Heather's diseased bone marrow. Finally, they gave Heather back those early cells. It formed a new, healthy marrow.
She is now 2 months out from the procedure and has no evidence of lupus at this time.
Heather's blood tests that detect lupus are now all normal. She's the first such patient in history this has ever happened to. Just 3 months ago, she was near death. Now she can hardly believe it.
Not to take medicines, not to worry about getting sick and having flare-ups, and if you catch a cold, you might end up flaring up and end up in the hospital and stuff, and it hasn't all really registered yet.
You can understand that. Dr. BURT says if Heather's tests for lupus stay normal for 5 years, then he'll allow himself to think that perhaps she's been cured of this disease. And as miraculous as this story is, some organizations are worried that a potentially lethal procedure is now being done to treat illnesses that often aren't fatal. And I'll be talking more, Linda, about that ethical side to this story tonight at 10.
What other diseases might this eventually be used on?
Well, Northwestern Memorial is already looking at these transplants for rheumatoid arthritis, for multiple sclerosis. And, like the Multiple Sclerosis Society, very concerned that an illness which is unpredictable, which will get much worse and then suddenly spontaneously get better, you're using a treatment that can be lethal for an illness that is unpredictable. That is a tricky situation.
And I remember 6 years ago doing a story on bone marrow transplants. It was to treat another kind of cancer.
Yes.
We're getting very used to doing this kind of procedure, are we not?
Yeah, once this isn't even really a bone marrow transplant. You can do a bone marrow transplant now without going into the bone marrow, simply by going to the peripheral blood and isolating, as we said, those very young cells. So as this transplant becomes easier, as the numbers get better, as it becomes less expensive, inevitably researchers are finding more and more use for it and more illnesses, where now the benefits possibly outweigh the risks, simply because we've gotten so much better at the transplant.
Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you, Linda.
Medical history is being made in Chicago in the fight against chronic autoimmune diseases. Doctors at Northwestern Memorial Hospital are thrilled with results from a procedure called a stem cell transplant. For the first time ever, it is proving successful against the disease lupus. Lil Litchcone joins us now with the story. Lil?
Robin, doctors hate to use the word cure, but so far that's exactly what this experimental procedure appears to be doing for one patient with lupus, an incurable disease of the immune system. Heather Markel says that after 13 years of deteriorating health, the stem cell transplant is giving her a fresh shot at life. This deep freeze may hold the promise of life for patients otherwise condemned to a slow death.
Yeah, I was scared that, it may not work, but at this point, I was just ready to try anything.
24-year-old Heather Markel has suffered from a severe form of lupus for 13 years.
I was 11 years old, and every day when I come home from school, a different joint would be hurting.
The chronic disease had turned her immune system against her own body, attacking her joints, lungs, brain, and kidneys. When she came into Northwestern, she was failing fast.
And we were concerned that if the disease was going to be left unchecked, she would lose her kidney function totally.
The severity of Heather's condition made her a candidate for a radical new treatment called a stem cell transplant. Doctors first remove the patient's own blood, then skim out about a teaspoon of healthy stem cells from a quart of the blood.
This cell separates the stem cells.
These purified cells are kept frozen in liquid nitrogen. Next, intense chemotherapy is used to destroy the patient's malfunctioning immune system. And then finally, the healthy stem cells are reintroduced. Heather received her transplant April 9th. 10 days later, the healthy cells had taken hold.
She is now 2 months out from the procedure and has no evidence of lupus at this time.
Doctors hesitate to say that Heather is cured, but they're obviously as optimistic as they are cautious.
It's very preliminary, it's very new, but you have to start somewhere.
Doctors are also quick to point out that the stem cell treatment is very high risk and appropriate only for the most serious cases. Northwestern Hospital is still running clinical trials on patients with multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. Robin?
Indulge, thank you. In medicine tonight, researchers at Northwestern Memorial Hospital have accomplished a world's first. They have reversed and possibly cured a woman about to die of lupus. That illness affects 3,000 people in the Chicago area alone. News 2 Chicago's medical editor, Dr. Michael Breen, is on call with more.
Just 3 months ago, Heather Markel was dying. Now she may be the world's first person ever cured of her disease. That disease is lupus. Her bone marrow cells were mistakenly attacking and destroying her kidney, joints, and spinal cord.
At this point, I was just ready to try anything. I've tried so many different things and nothing's worked.
That cure was to give her a new bone marrow. First, 1.5 quarts of blood was removed from her body. That 1.5 quarts was reduced in this lab to a single teaspoon, a teaspoon of very early cells that could create a new bone marrow. Next, Heather's own bone marrow was destroyed, and finally, the new cells were transplanted. They've now formed a healthy marrow. It's an almost miraculous story, but even this story has created a little debate. The question is, how often do you use a potentially lethal procedure on an illness whose future is uncertain? Northwestern also uses the procedure for very severe rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. But the MS Society says it's, quote, very concerned about using a high-risk treatment to treat a non-fatal disease, unquote. Researchers counter, sometimes illnesses like MS and lupus are fatal.
Actually, you can ask, how can you ethically, for that subgroup of people, not offer them something more aggressive?
There's at the very least one person who more than agrees.
I would have been born 10 years earlier. I never would have made it this far.
You sound thankful.
Oh, extremely. I am very thankful. Yes.
Dr. Michael Breen, News 2 Chicago.
Now, researchers say that there are no guarantees, but so far, Heather Markel has absolutely no signs of lupus. She is the first person in history whose blood tests for lupus have returned to normal.
NBC5, Chicago.
A teenager gunned down, standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bent metal and broken glass along Route 83. A homeowner's nightmare. Raw sewage flows into South suburban homes. And a medical first. A new procedure changes this woman's life.
Now, the NBC5 News, 4:30.
Doctors at Northwestern Memorial Hospital are cautiously optimistic about Heather Markel's future. The 24-year-old Ohio woman underwent a new procedure that may have once and for all eradicated lupus from her life. For the first time in 10 years, all the markers for lupus are gone from the body of Heather Markel.
It's kind of hard to deal with because it seems like I've been putting up with it all my life. I mean, over half my life I've had this.
For 13 of her 24 years, Heather battled systemic lupus, an autoimmune disease that attacked her lungs, kidneys, blood, and central nervous system. Drugs sometimes help put lupus in remission, but there is no cure, at least not until now. Heather has been lupus-free for 2 months following a stem cell transplant. This tape from Northwestern shows a stem cell transplant on another patient. Stem cells are a sort of generic blood cell. After doctors completely destroy a patient's immune system with drugs, newly infused stem cells can restart it. But this time, the disease is gone. After 10 days, Heather's new blood cells and new immune system were ready to start fresh. If what now looks like a cure really does last, she can get back to the life she put on hold.
I'd like to go back to medical school. Where I was attending was Ross University. It's in Dominica, which is off the coast of South America. So I'm just trying to get all my lupus under control and get back to where I want to be. Right now, I feel really good. And I'm really optimistic that this is going to be the final stage.
As you know, Illinois Attorney General Jim Ryan has lymphoma. That is a type of cancer. He is also scheduled to undergo this procedure.
This is Chicago's very own WGN News at 9.
In health news, there's some promising research results for lupus patients. Doctors at Northwestern performed the first bone marrow transplant to treat lupus. The results, the patient no longer has signs of the disease in her system. 24-year-old Heather Markel has had lupus for 13 years. The disease has attacked her lungs, kidneys, blood, and nervous system. Doctors collected healthy stem cells from Heather's blood, treated it, and then returned it to her body.
We have a short-term remission with no evidence of disease, and for the first time in 10 years, all these markers in her blood of disease are gone.
Over half my life I've had this. So, you know, it hasn't really registered completely that I may one day be off medication.
Doctors will continue to monitor Heather's progress. 25 years ago, lupus patients had only a 50% chance of surviving for 5 years.